In this video, we will talk about diets and MS, and in particular about the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet refers to the diet of the countries of the Mediterranean basin. The concept of the Mediterranean diet was defined by the physiologist and cell Benjamin Keyes in the 1960s. Dr. Keyes was interested in the influence of diet on human health and especially cardiovascular health. This interest arose after the contradictory observation that American business executives, who were presumably very well-nourished, had much higher rates of heart disease than people living in post-war Europe, where food supply had been reduced, which led him to postulate a relationship between cholesterol consumption and cardiovascular diseases. Subsequently, the observation that southern Italy had the highest concentration of centenarians in the world led him to hypothesize that a Mediterranean-style diet low in animal fats protected against heart disease, while a diet high in animal fats induced it. To test this hypothesis, Dr. Keyes began a 25-year observational study known as the 7 Countries Study, which followed people from 7 countries with different dietary habits. These countries were USA, Finland, the former Yugoslavia, Holland, Italy, Greece, and Japan. This study allowed him to demonstrate that blood cholesterol levels and saturated fat consumption are associated with cardiovascular diseases. In the countries of the Mediterranean basin, where less saturated fats and more unsaturated fats of vegetable origin were consumed, the incidence of cardiovascular diseases was lower. Although this message was not fully recognized for the next 20 years, as all dietary fats were considered to be harmful, the value of these studies and the Mediterranean diet has subsequently been recognized. 7 countries of the Mediterranean basin, specifically Croatia, Cyprus, Spain, Greece, Italy, Morocco, and Portugal, presented this diet to UNESCO, and in 2013 it was inscribed on the representative list of the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity. The Mediterranean diet is much more than a healthy diet. It is a cultural heritage that implies a set of skills, knowledge, rituals, symbols, and traditions related to crops, harvesting, fishing, animal husbandry, conservation, processing, cooking, and, in particular, food consumption. Next, we will see which foods does the Mediterranean diet recommend. What does this diet say about energy and the timing, why it can be beneficial in MS, and which evidence supports it. The foods that the Mediterranean diet recommends to obtain the 3 macronutrients are the following. To obtain carbohydrates, it recommends eliminating foods rich in simple carbohydrates such as white bread and white flour, and instead to consume foods rich in complex carbohydrates such as whole grains and their derivatives, as well as vegetables and fruit. To obtain protein, it is recommended to consume low-fat meats such as rabbit and turkey meat, fish, especially oily fish, and legumes. Eggs can also be eaten as a source of protein if eaten in moderation, while fatty meats such as beef or lamb should be very low. Finally, regarding the consumption of lipids, the Mediterranean diet recommends eliminating saturated fat, which is why it recommends eliminating foods such as butter, bacon, or palm oil, and instead to obtain lipids mainly from olive oil. Specifically, the Mediterranean diet recommends consume complex carbohydrates daily through whole grains and their derivatives, as well as vegetables rich in carbohydrates such as potatoes. Consume fruit and vegetables daily, as well as extra virgin olive oil and nuts as a source of lipids. Milk and dairy products may also be consumed daily as long as they are low in fat or fat-free. Several times a week it is recommended to consume legumes and fish, especially oily fish. You can also eat lean meat such as turkey, rabbit, or chicken several times a week, and eggs once or twice per week. Red meat and sausage should not be taken more than once a week. And finally, chips, sweets, pastries, or processed food should only be consumed very sporadically. In addition, the Mediterranean diet recommends some type of daily physical activity. Regarding energy, the Mediterranean diet recommends reducing energy intake in general, and that between 50 and 55% of this energy be obtained from carbohydrates, between 30 and 35% from lipids, and between 12 and 15% from proteins. The Mediterranean diet does not give recommendations about the time when food should be consumed. Let's see now why the Mediterranean diet can be beneficial for people with MS. As we have just discussed, the Mediterranean diet recommends a high consumption of fruits and vegetables, which represents a high consumption of vitamins and antioxidants that are beneficial in MS. Since there are vitamins that are anti-inflammatory, other vitamins and antioxidants could be neuroprotective, and some vitamins might even be remyelinating. In addition, many vitamins and antioxidants are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier, which facilitates their action on the central nervous system. The Mediterranean diet also recommends a high consumption of oily fish rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which are beneficial for people with MS, as they are anti-inflammatory. A high intake of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains also means a high intake of fiber that is beneficial in MS, since it is the main food of the gut microbiota and therefore necessary to maintain a healthy and diverse microbiota, which is very important in MS. Finally, the reduction of red meat, sausages, chips, pastries, sweets, and processed food in general means a reduction in the consumption of saturated fatty acids and salt that they are harmful for people with MS, since both saturated fatty acids and salt are pro-inflammatory. It is also important not to forget that the Mediterranean diet can help control other diseases such as obesity, high cholesterol, and cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, or hypertension, which can be comorbidities in people affected by MS, that is, diseases that if they occur at the same time as MS can interact with it and worsen its course. Regarding the scientific evidence, there are some observational studies, like the first two on this list, that suggest that a diet similar to the Mediterranean diet could reduce the risk of MS, while other studies, like the third on this list, have not found an association between the Mediterranean diet and the development of MS. A very interesting clinical trial led by Dr. Sand compared people affected by MS who followed or not a Mediterranean diet for 6 months. This study reported a slight reduction in fatigue and disability observed in people who followed the Mediterranean diet. Although we are aware that clinical trials are still lacking, our recommendation for people affected by multiple sclerosis is that the Mediterranean diet can be a good option since, as we have seen, it is a healthy and balanced diet with many advantages for people with MS, and it is also a very varied diet and therefore quite easy to follow. We also think that it is a good idea to complement it with supplements of vitamins, antioxidants, probiotics, and fiber to increase the benefits of these nutrients.